The funeral pyre burned against the twilight sky like a wound in the fabric of the world itself. I stood hidden among the dense line of pine trees at the cemetery's edge. My fingers pressed against the rough bark until splinters bit into my skin. The pain was necessary. It kept me tethered to reality, reminded me that I was still breathing even though everyone below believed otherwise. The wind carried smoke and the scent of burning sage toward me, mixing with the earthy smell of recent rain. My throat tightened as I watched the massive gathering of pack members, their heads bowed, their shoulders heavy with grief I didn't deserve. At the center of it all stood Damien. The Alpha King's frame seemed diminished somehow, as if the weight of sorrow had compressed something vital within him. Even from this distance, I could see how rigidly he held himself, how his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. His dark hair fell forward, obscuring his face, but I knew that expression. I had seen it once before, years ago, when his father died, and he'd locked himself away for 3 days. That same terrible blankness, that refusal to let the world see him break. But he was breaking now. I could feel it through the bond we shared. That golden thread that connected us, stretched thin and screaming across the distance between the living and the dead, except I wasn't dead. The ceremony began with Elder Miriam's voice, cracked with age and emotion, reciting the traditional words. I closed my eyes, unable to watch as they spoke about me in past tense, as if I had already become a memory, a ghost, a cautionary tale. My chest constricted. This was necessary, I told myself. This was the only way to protect them all. 3 days ago, I had been a different person. 3 days ago, I had woken in our bed with Damien's arm draped across my waist, his breath warm against my neck, and believed I understood my place in this world. I was his Omega, his mate, his queen. Soft-spoken, gentle, the one who smoothed tensions and brought calm to his storms. Everyone said I was too delicate for this role, too fragile to stand beside someone as powerful as the Alpha King. They were right. In ways they couldn't imagine. The attack had come at dawn. I still remembered the sound, not the howls or the snarls, but the silence that preceded them. That empty, hollow quiet that made my skin prickle with ancient warning. I had been in the garden, my fingers stained with soil from planting winter roses, when the first enemy wolf breached our territory. They moved like shadows, organized and lethal, targeting not the warriors, but the vulnerable, the children, the elderly, me. Damien had been in a council meeting. By the time the alarm sounded, 3 enemy wolves had cornered me against the garden wall. I remembered the leader's eyes, pale yellow, filled with calculated cruelty. He'd smiled before lunging. What happened next still felt like fragments of a nightmare. The panic, the desperate surge of something wild and unfamiliar flooding through me. The way reality seemed to fracture at the edges. When I came back to myself, all 3 wolves lay motionless around me, and my hands glowed with a light I didn't recognize. An ancient, terrible light that felt both foreign and intimately mine. That's when I knew. That's when the truth I'd been running from my entire life finally caught up. I wasn't just an Omega, I was something else. Something dangerous. The old woman who found me in the garden, a healer named Sage, who'd always watched me with knowing eyes, had pulled me aside before anyone else arrived. "You need to disappear," she'd whispered urgently, her weathered hands gripping my shoulders. "They'll come for you now. Not just enemies, but those who fear what you represent. This power. It's been hidden for generations, but now it's awake. If the wrong people discover what you are, they'll either use you or destroy you. And Damien," her voice cracked, "they'll use him to control you. I can't just leave. They need to believe you're gone. It's the only way to protect them. To protect him." She'd helped me stage it. The evidence of a fatal attack, the blood. My own drawn in careful amounts. The torn clothing. The story that I'd been dragged into the forest by retreating enemies. Sage was respected, ancient, her word unquestioned. When she declared me lost, killed in the chaos of battle, no one doubted. No one except my heart, which shattered with every step that took me farther from home. Now I watched my own funeral, and the cruelty of it threatened to undo me completely. Damien moved forward through the crowd. Pack members reached out to touch his arm, to offer comfort, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes remained fixed on the pyre, on the simple white shroud that supposedly contained my remains. Elder Miriam finished her recitation and stepped back, leaving Damien alone before the flames. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. Another person shifted uncomfortably. Still, Damien said nothing. Then his shoulders began to shake. The sob that tore from him was a sound I'd never heard before, raw and broken, the kind of grief that came from somewhere deeper than the soul. His knees buckled, and he caught himself against the stone altar, his fingers digging into the marble as if he could physically hold himself together through force of will alone. "No," I whispered into the darkening forest. "Damien, please." She shouldn't have been alone. His voice carried across the cemetery, rough and damaged. "I should have been there. I should have—" He broke off, his entire frame convulsing with silent sobs. Marcus, his second, moved to his side, placing a hand on Damien's shoulder. The gesture was meant to comfort, but Damien flinched away from it as if burned. "Don't," Damien said. "Don't tell me it's not my fault. Don't tell me she's in a better place. Don't." His voice rose, edged with fury and desperation. She was everything, and I failed her. Tears streamed down my face unchecked. The bond between us thrummed with his anguish, and I had to grip the tree harder to keep from running to him, from revealing the deception, from ending this torture for both of us. But Sage's words echoed in my mind. "They'll use him to control you." I had seen the evidence she'd shown me, ancient texts, prophecies, warnings about Omegas born with the old magic. Throughout history, they'd been hunted, captured, forced to use their power for others' gain. And those they loved became leverage, tools of manipulation. If I stayed, if anyone discovered what I truly was, Damien would become a target. They would hurt him to hurt me. They would threaten him to control me. I would rather die 1,000 times than let that happen. The ceremony continued. Damien stood silent now, staring at the flames as they consumed the empty shroud. Pack members came forward one by one, placing flowers and tokens at the pyre's base. I recognized faces: Helena, who'd taught me to bake bread; Thomas, who'd helped me train despite my weak fighting skills; little Sophie, barely 6 years old, clutching her mother's hand as tears rolled down her cheeks. They were mourning me. They believed I was gone. And perhaps, in a way, I was. The woman I'd been. The gentle, compliant Omega who'd tried so hard to fit into a role she'd never fully understood. She had died in that garden. What remained was something rawer, more dangerous. Something that needed to understand itself before it could return, if it could return. As darkness settled completely over the cemetery, the crowd began to disperse, but Damien remained, a solitary figure backlit by dying flames. Marcus hovered nearby, concern evident in his posture, but maintained a respectful distance. Hours passed. The moon rose, full and bright, casting silver light across the grounds. Still, Damien didn't move. I should have left. Every moment I stayed increased the risk of discovery, but I couldn't tear myself away. Couldn't abandon him even now when abandonment was the whole point. Finally, when the pyre had burned down to glowing embers, Damien spoke again. His voice was quieter now, meant only for himself, or for the ghost he believed could hear him. "I never told you," he said to the ashes. "I never said the words properly. I thought we had time. I thought—" His breath hitched. "You were the only person who ever looked at me and saw beyond the title, beyond the power. You saw me, just me, and you didn't turn away. You made me believe I could be more than what they made me. And I took that for granted. I took you for granted." My hand pressed against my chest, trying to contain the pain that threatened to split me open. "I'll find them," Damien continued, his tone shifting into something darker. "Whoever did this, whoever took you from me, I'll find every last one and make them beg for the mercy of death. I'll burn their territories to the ground. Damien." Marcus's voice cut through gently but firmly. "She wouldn't want that. You know she wouldn't." A long pause. Then Damien's laugh, bitter and hollow. "You're right. She'd tell me vengeance solves nothing." She'd put her hand on my arm with that look in her eyes. That way she had of making me feel like maybe I could be better than my worst instincts. His voice dropped to a whisper. God, I miss her. I miss her so much I can barely breathe. I bit down on my fist to muffle the sound, threatening to escape. Marcus stepped closer. Come back to the house. You need rest. Tomorrow she'll still be gone. Damien's words were flat, final. Tomorrow and every day after. There's no tomorrow that matters anymore. He turned away from the pyre finally, his movements mechanical, and I caught a glimpse of his face in the moonlight. The devastation written there nearly brought me to my knees. His eyes, usually so fierce and alive, looked empty, hollowed out. This was killing him. My death, fake as it was destroying him piece by piece. A small, selfish part of me whispered that I should reveal myself, end this cruelty, let him hold me and reassure him that I was alive and safe. But the larger part, the part that had seen what my power could do, that understood the danger I represented, knew better. As Damien and Marcus walked back toward the pack house, other figures emerged from the shadows. Council members, I realized, Elder Tobias, Counselor Regina, and others whose names I knew, but whose faces I'd never fully trusted. They surrounded Damien with practiced concern, but something about their movements made my skin crawl. Alpha King, Tobias said, his voice carrying a false sympathy that set my teeth on edge. This tragedy has shaken us all. But the pack needs leadership. Decisions must be made. There are matters that require your immediate attention. Not tonight, Marcus interjected sharply. These matters concern the pack's security, Regina pressed. The attack that killed the Queen suggests a breach in our defenses. We need to discuss strengthening borders, forming new alliances, perhaps even considering a new union that could... Damien stopped walking. The air around him seemed to thicken, his alpha power rolling out in waves that made even the council members step back. If you finish that sentence, he said quietly, dangerously, I will personally ensure you never speak again. Regina paled but persisted. I meant no disrespect. I only suggest what's practical. The pack needs a strong Omega presence, someone who can get out of my sight. The command in his voice was absolute. The council members scattered like leaves before a storm, leaving only Marcus and Damien in the clearing. I watched them go, my mind spinning. Already they were circling, vultures sensing opportunity and tragedy. How long before they pushed harder? How long before grief made Damien vulnerable to their manipulations? A sound behind me, subtle, barely a whisper of movement, made me freeze. You need to move deeper into the forest. Sage's voice came from the darkness. There are scouts patrolling, looking for any trace of the attackers. They'll find your scent soon. I turned to find her standing among the trees, her ancient eyes reflecting moonlight. She held out a small pack, supplies. Enough for 3 days' journey north. There's a place, a sanctuary of sorts, where others like you have found refuge. Instructions are inside. Others like me? My voice came out as barely a whisper. You're not the first Omega born with the old gifts, child. You won't be the last, but you must learn to control it before you can return, before you can be with him safely. I took the pack, my hands trembling. Will I ever be able to come back? Sage's expression softened with something like pity. That depends on what you become in the wilderness, on whether you learn to master what lives inside you, or whether it masters you instead. She glanced back toward where Damien had disappeared. He loves you deeply. That love will either save you both or destroy you. The choice is yours to make. Before I could respond, she melted back into the shadows, leaving me alone with my grief and the impossible weight of the decision I'd already made. One last time, I looked toward the pack house where warm light glowed in windows. Somewhere in there, Damien was suffering, broken by a loss he believed was permanent. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to go to him, to end this deception. Instead, I turned north, toward the deep forest and the unknown that waited there. The bond between us stretched and pulled, a golden thread growing thinner with each step I took away from home, but it didn't break. Even death, or the illusion of it, couldn't sever what we'd built together. I'll come back, I promised silently, sending the thought along that thread even though I knew he couldn't hear it. When I'm strong enough to protect you instead of endangering you, I'll come back. Wait for me. The forest swallowed me whole, and behind me, the last embers of my funeral pyre finally went dark. The northern forest was older than memory, darker than grief. I had been walking for 2 days, guided only by Sage's hastily drawn map and the failing light that filtered through the canopy above. My legs ached. My feet blistered inside boots never meant for this kind of journey. But I welcomed the physical pain. It was simpler than the emotional agony that threatened to overwhelm me every time I let my guard down. The bond with Damien pulsed constantly, a second heartbeat beneath my skin. I could feel him even at this distance. His rage, his despair, the terrible emptiness that had settled over him like a shroud. Sometimes, late at night, when exhaustion finally forced me to stop, I would press my hand against my chest and imagine I could send something back along that thread. Comfort. Hope. The truth that I still lived, but I couldn't risk it. If he felt even a flicker of my presence, he would come looking. And I couldn't let him find what I was becoming. The changes had started the second night. I'd made camp in a small clearing, gathering enough courage to practice, to try to summon whatever power had erupted from me during the attack. At first, nothing happened. I sat cross-legged on the damp earth, hands outstretched, feeling foolish and desperate in equal measure. Then my fingertips began to glow. It started as a faint luminescence, like moonlight trapped beneath skin. But as I focused, as I reached for that strange reservoir of energy I could now sense deep within myself, the light grew brighter. Silver-white radiance spilled from my palms, casting dancing shadows across the trees. And with the light came knowledge, ancient, instinctive understanding of things I'd never been taught. I could sense the life force of everything around me. The rabbits huddled in their warren 30 feet to my left, the owl perched in the oak behind me. Even the trees themselves thrummed with a slow, patient energy that made my breath catch, and I could manipulate it. The realization terrified me. This wasn't just defensive magic or healing ability. This was power over life itself. The capacity to strengthen or weaken, to protect or harm. No wonder Sage had insisted I disappear. No wonder the old texts spoke of omegas like me being hunted. In the wrong hands, I could be a weapon. I'd extinguished the light quickly, my heart racing, and spent the rest of the night curled against a tree trunk, afraid to sleep, afraid to dream, afraid of what I might become. Now, on the third day, the landscape began to change. The forest grew denser, the trees so massive that 3 people linking hands couldn't encircle their trunks. Moss carpeted everything, muffling sound until even my footsteps seemed to disappear. The air tasted different here, cleaner, sharper, charged with something I couldn't name. Magic, perhaps, or just the weight of centuries. According to Sage's map, the sanctuary was close. I'd been following a series of markers carved into specific trees, symbols that looked ancient, their meaning lost to me but their presence reassuring. Someone had walked this path before. Someone had survived. The sun was beginning its descent when I heard the water, a river, swift and cold, cutting through a ravine ahead. I pushed through the underbrush and stopped at the edge, staring down at the rushing current 20 feet below. The map indicated I needed to cross here, but I saw no bridge, no obvious path. I was searching the banks for a safer crossing point when the arrow embedded itself in the tree beside my head. I froze, every muscle locked in place. The arrow quivered from the impact, its black fletching stark against the pale bark. A warning shot. Whoever fired it had chosen not to hit me. "You're trespassing." The voice came from above, female and sharp with authority. "This land is protected. Turn back." Slowly I raised my hands, palms open. "I'm looking for sanctuary. I was told there's a place here where what? Where rogues hide? Where traitors run?" A figure dropped from the branches above, landing in a crouch with predatory grace. She straightened, and I found myself facing a woman perhaps a few years older than me, her dark hair braided tight against her skull, a bow still held ready in her hands. Her eyes were the pale gray of winter ice. "We don't take refugees, we don't take charity cases, and we certainly don't take pack wolves who bring their problems to our door." I'm not... I started, then stopped. What was I? Not Pack anymore. Not really. Not Omega in the traditional sense. Not anything I understood. I need help. I have abilities I can't control. And if I go back, people I love will be in danger. The woman's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Show me. What? Your abilities. Show me or turn around and leave. Those are your options. My hands trembled as I lowered them, calling on the power I'd barely begun to understand. The light came easier this time, spilling from my palms in silvery ribbons. I focused on the tree beside me, the one still bearing her warning arrow, and felt my consciousness expand to touch its ancient life force. The tree responded. New growth erupted from dormant buds, leaves unfurling in impossible autumn bloom. Moss spread across the bark in spiraling patterns, and I felt the tree's gratitude wash through me, an alien emotion but unmistakably real. When I released the connection, breathing hard from the effort, the woman was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. A life-bringer, she said quietly. I'll be damned. We haven't seen one in decades. She lowered her bow finally, though her posture remained wary. I'm Nara, and you just became either our greatest hope or our biggest problem. Come. The matriarch will decide which. She turned and began walking along the ravine's edge without checking to see if I followed. I hurried after her, questions tumbling over themselves in my mind. Who's the matriarch? What is this place? Are there others like me? Save your questions. Nara's pace was punishing, forcing me to half-jog to keep up. You'll get answers soon enough, or you'll be executed for bringing danger to our refuge. Really depends on how the day goes. The casual mention of execution should have frightened me more than it did. But after everything I'd been through, the threat felt almost abstract. What was one more danger added to the pile? We walked for another hour, the forest growing stranger with each step. Flowers bloomed that I'd never seen before, their colors too vivid to be natural. Animals watched from the undergrowth, not with fear, but with an unnerving intelligence that made my skin prickle, and everywhere, I felt it. Magic, thick and wild and ancient, saturating the very air. Finally, we emerged into a clearing that took my breath away. It wasn't a village exactly, more like an organic settlement that had grown rather than been built. Structures wound around and through the massive trees, some carved directly into living trunks, others suspended on platforms connected by rope bridges. Gardens flourished in impossible places, hanging from branches, nestled in tree hollows, spreading across the forest floor in riots of color, and everywhere, people. No, not just people, women. Dozens of them, ranging from teenagers to elders, all moving with purpose through the settlement. Some tended gardens, others worked at what looked like forges or workshops. Children played under watchful eyes, but only girls, I noticed. Not a single male among them. Welcome to Thornhaven, Nara said, her tone dry. Last refuge of the unwanted, the dangerous, and the desperate. Try not to do anything stupid in the next 10 minutes. The matriarch has a low tolerance for stupidity. She led me through winding paths, past curious stares and whispered conversations. I felt exposed, evaluated, found wanting by eyes that had seen too much. These women wore their strength like armor, their past traumas visible in scars, both physical and emotional. I recognized myself in them, or what I might become, given time. The matriarch's dwelling sat at the settlement's heart, built around and into the largest tree I'd ever seen. Its trunk was so massive that a dozen of the other structures could have fit inside it comfortably. Roots thicker than my torso snaked across the ground, and the canopy above seemed to touch the sky itself. Nara stopped at the entrance, a natural opening in the trunk carved into a doorway. She's inside, alone. Don't touch anything, don't lie, and for the love of the moon, don't try to use your power unless she asks you to. She met my eyes seriously. The matriarch is the only thing keeping this place safe. Respect that. Then she was gone, disappearing back into the settlement and leaving me alone. I took a breath, steadied myself, and stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit by some kind of luminescent moss that cast everything in soft blue-green light. The space was larger than it should have been, the walls living wood that seemed to breathe. Books lined carved shelves, scrolls lay scattered across a massive desk, and herbs hung drying from the ceiling, filling the air with complex, earthy scents. "Come closer, child. My eyes aren't what they used to be." The voice came from the far end of the room, where a figure sat in a chair that seemed grown from the tree itself. As I approached, she came into focus, ancient beyond measure, her silver blonde hair hanging in a thick braid over one shoulder, her face mapped with wrinkles that spoke of centuries rather than decades. But her eyes, those were sharp and bright, missing nothing. "Matriarch," I said, unsure of the proper protocol. "I was told. I know why you're here. Sit." It wasn't a request. I sat on the cushion she indicated, suddenly aware of how filthy I was, how I must look after 3 days in the wilderness. The matriarch leaned forward, studying me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. "Life-bringer magic. Rare. Dangerous. You're the first one to find us in 30 years. Her gaze sharpened. "And you're bonded, mated, to an alpha, if I'm reading your energy correctly. A powerful one." I flinched at the mention of Damien, feeling the bond pulse in response. "He thinks you're dead," she continued, not unkindly. "Clever. Painful. But clever. The question is whether you faked your death to protect him or to protect yourself." "Both," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "During an attack, my power manifested. I killed 3 wolves without meaning to. An elder helped me disappear before anyone could discover what I was. She said if the wrong people found out, they'd use you as a weapon, use your mate as leverage to control you, force you to kill or heal at their command until you burned yourself out or went mad." The matriarch nodded. She was right. Lifebringers have been hunted for millennia. Those who weren't killed were enslaved. The few who escaped made their way here, to Thornhaven, where we could teach them control. Hope flickered in my chest. "Then you can help me? You can teach me? Perhaps. Or perhaps you'll prove too dangerous to be allowed to live." She raised a hand when I opened my mouth to protest. "I don't say this to frighten you, child. I say it because you need to understand what you're asking. The power you carry isn't just magic. It's the ability to unmake creation itself. In the wrong hands, or with insufficient control, you could destroy everything you love, including your mate." The words hit like physical blows. I would never, not intentionally. But what happens when you're angry, when you're desperate, when someone threatens him in your presence? The matriarch's expression was grave. Life-bringer magic responds to emotion, and you, newly awakened, freshly bonded, traumatized by your own power, you're a storm waiting to break. That's why we must test you. Test me how?" She stood, moving with surprising grace for her age, and gestured for me to follow. We walked deeper into the tree, downstairs carved into living wood, until we reached a chamber that seemed to exist outside normal space. The walls glowed with the same luminescence as above, but stronger, brighter, casting everything in ethereal light. In the center of the chamber stood a pool of water so still it looked like glass. "This is the mirror of depths," the matriarch explained. "It shows truth. Not the truth you tell yourself, but the truth you hide from. Face it, and you may earn a place among us. Fail, and..." She let the sentence hang. My throat went dry. "What happens if I fail? Then you'll understand why you can never go back. Why the kindest thing would be to remain dead to those you love." She placed a weathered hand on my shoulder, and for the first time, I saw compassion in her ancient eyes. "But perhaps you'll surprise me. The brave ones sometimes do." She left me alone in the chamber, the door sealing shut behind her with a finality that made my heart race. I approached the pool slowly, afraid of what I might see. The surface remained perfectly still, reflecting nothing. Not even my face as I leaned over it. Then I touched the water. Images erupted across the surface, vivid and terrible. I saw myself in the garden during the attack, but this time from outside my own body. I watched as the enemy wolves circled, as fear transformed into panic, as panic exploded into power. But I also saw what I'd missed in the chaos. the expression on my face when the magic took hold. Not fear, not panic, ecstasy. The power had felt good, had felt right. In that moment when life and death hung in balance, when I held the ability to unmake 3 living beings, I had reveled in it. The scene shifted. Now I saw Damien at the funeral, his face ravaged by grief, but overlaid with another image. Damien discovering I was alive, Damien holding me, relief and joy radiating from him. And then another shift. Damien's face twisted in horror as I lost control, as my power lashed out in a moment of anger or fear, as his life force drained away beneath my touch. I jerked back from the pool, gasping. But the visions continued. They filled the chamber, surrounding me with possibilities both beautiful and horrifying. Futures where I mastered my gifts and returned home triumphant. Futures where I destroyed everything I touched. Futures where the bond between Damien and me became a weapon that others used to tear both of us apart. And underneath it all, a question that burned brighter than any vision. What are you willing to become to protect what you love? The chamber spun. My knees hit the floor. The bond with Damien pulsed frantically, responding to my distress, and I felt him, distant but present, his own anguish mixing with mine until I couldn't tell where he ended and I began. Stop. I whispered to the visions. Please, stop. They didn't stop. They intensified, showing me the darkest truth of all. That part of me, the part that had tasted power and found it sweet, didn't want to go back. Didn't want to be the gentle, compliant Omega anymore. Wanted to embrace this wild, dangerous thing I was becoming, and damn the consequences. That realization broke something inside me. A sound escaped my throat, not quite a sob, not quite a scream, and with it came light, pouring from my hands, from my skin, from every part of me until the chamber blazed with radiance so bright I couldn't see. When the light finally faded and my vision cleared, I found myself lying on the cold floor, exhausted, trembling. The pool had gone still again, its surface once more showing nothing. The door opened. The matriarch stood in the entrance, her expression unreadable. You passed, she said quietly. Not because you conquered your darkness, but because you acknowledged it. That's the first step toward true control. She helped me to my feet with surprising strength. Welcome to Thornhaven, child. Your real education begins tomorrow. As she led me back up into the settlement, toward quarters where I could rest, I felt the bond with Damien settle into a steadier rhythm. He was still grieving, still broken, but alive, safe. And I would learn to be worthy of him, would learn to control this power, would find a way back, or I would die trying. 6 weeks had passed since I arrived at Thornhaven, and I barely recognized myself. The woman who stared back from the polished metal mirror in my quarters bore little resemblance to the soft-spoken Omega who'd fled her home. My blonde hair, once carefully maintained and styled, now hung in a long braid down my back, streaked lighter by hours spent training under the open sky. My body had changed too, leaner, harder, marked with small scars from combat practice and the occasional backlash of magic gone wrong. But it was my eyes that showed the most dramatic transformation. They held a sharpness now, a wariness that hadn't existed before. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, and yet, every night I dreamed of Damien. The bond between us remained constant, a golden thread that distance couldn't break. Through it, I felt echoes of his days, the meetings he endured, the decisions he forced himself to make, the moments when grief ambushed him and left him breathless. He was functioning, leading the pack with the same iron will he'd always possessed. But the lightness that had existed between us, the joy I'd brought to his life, was gone. I'd taken that from him, the weight of it pressed against my chest constantly. You're distracted again. Nara's voice cut through my thoughts as her practice sword connected with my ribs. Not hard enough to truly hurt, but enough to make me stumble. 3rd time this morning. Whatever's in your head, leave it there. Out here, hesitation means death. I recovered my stance, raising my own wooden blade. We stood in one of Thornhaven's training circles, a cleared space where the morning sun could penetrate the forest canopy. Around us, other women practiced various skills, some with weapons, others with magic, a few combining both in ways that made my breath catch. Again, Nara commanded, circling me with predatory focus. And this time, use what I taught you. Don't just defend. Anticipate. She attacked, and I moved. Not away, but into the strike, using her momentum against her as I'd been taught. My sword caught hers, deflected it, and I followed through with a strike aimed at her shoulder. She blocked it easily, but I saw approval flash across her face. Better. You're learning to trust your instincts instead of overthinking. She stepped back, lowering her weapon. But you're still holding back, still afraid of what you might do if you fully commit. I hurt people, I said quietly. Last time I fully committed to anything, 3 wolves died. They were trying to kill you. There's a difference between defense and murder, even if the result looks the same. Nara planted her sword in the ground and wiped sweat from her forehead. You want to know what I think? I think you're more afraid of your own power than you are of dying, and until you make peace with what you are, you'll never be able to control it. Before I could respond, a bell rang out across Thornhaven. 3 clear notes that made everyone stop and look toward the matriarch's tree. Assembly, Nara muttered. Come on. When she calls, we answer. We joined the stream of women converging on the central clearing. I'd learned in my weeks here that assemblies were rare, usually called only when something significant had happened. My stomach tightened with apprehension. The matriarch emerged from her dwelling, and the crowd fell silent. Age had not diminished her presence. If anything, it amplified it. When she spoke, her voice carried effortlessly across the space. News has reached us from the outside world, she began. The Western territories are mobilizing. They're forming what they're calling a coalition. Multiple packs banding together under a single banner. She paused, letting the significance sink in. They claim their purpose is mutual protection. But our scouts report something else. They're hunting for someone. Someone with rare abilities that they believe could shift the balance of power. Ice flooded my veins. Around me, several women glanced in my direction. They haven't named their target publicly, the matriarch continued, but they're offering a substantial reward for information about any Omega displaying unusual powers, particularly those connected to life magic. Her ancient eyes found mine across the crowd. They believe this individual survived a recent attack and fled into the northern territories, our territories. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. I felt Nara's hand on my arm, steadying me as my knees threatened to give out. What do we do? Someone called out. Do we turn her over? We protect our own, the matriarch said firmly. As we always have. Thornhaven has stood for 3 centuries as a refuge precisely because we do not bow to outside pressure. However, her gaze swept across us all. This threat is more organized than any we've faced before. They have resources, numbers, and determination. We must be prepared for the possibility that they'll find us. Let them come. Another voice shouted. We've defended this place before. Against raiders and rogues, yes, but not against a coordinated force of multiple packs. The matriarch's expression was grave. I'm not saying we cannot prevail. I'm saying the cost may be higher than we've paid before. Each of you must decide if you're willing to pay it. The assembly dissolved into heated discussion, women breaking into smaller groups to debate and plan. But I couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the terrible realization crashing over me. They were hunting me. And by coming here, I'd endangered everyone in Thornhaven. This isn't your fault, Nara said, reading my expression. They would have hunted you regardless of where you went. At least here, you're not alone. I should leave. If I'm gone, they'll have no reason to threaten this place. And go where? Back to your pack, where your mate thinks you're dead? Into the wilderness, where you're vulnerable and untrained? Nara shook her head. Running solved nothing the first time. It won't solve anything now. The matriarch approached us, her ancient face thoughtful. Walk with me, child. We need to talk. She led me away from the crowd, deeper into the forest where privacy was assured. We walked in silence for several minutes before she finally spoke. 6 weeks ago, you came here broken and afraid. What are you now? I considered the question carefully. Stronger, but still afraid. Good. Fear keeps us cautious. It's the absence of fear that gets us killed. She stopped beside a small stream, watching water flow over smooth stones. Your mate. Tell me about him. The question surprised me. Why? Because his fate and yours are intertwined. Whether you're together or apart, the bond you share is stronger than most. I feel it radiating from you constantly. He's not just your mate. He's your anchor. And right now, he's suffering. Guilt twisted in my gut. I know. I feel it every day. But what choice did I have? If I'd stayed? If you'd stayed, you would have endangered him. I understand your reasoning, but there's something you haven't considered. She turned to face me fully. By leaving, by letting him believe you're dead, you've made him dangerous. An alpha king consumed by grief and rage is not a stable leader. What decisions might he make in his current state? What threats might he pose to himself and others? I hadn't thought about it that way. Through the bond, I'd felt his pain but hadn't considered how that pain might be manifesting in his leadership, his choices. The coalition forming in the Western Territories, the matriarch continued. Do you know who leads it? I shook my head. Neither do we, which is concerning. But I suspect, and this is only suspicion, that your mate may be involved. Perhaps not as a leader, but as a key player. Grief makes people seek purpose, and what better purpose than hunting down the ones responsible for their loss? The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think he's looking for my killers, that he might be part of this coalition. I think it's possible. And if that's true, if he's out there organizing a military force while consumed by vengeance, the danger extends far beyond Thornhaven. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Which means you need to make a choice. Continue hiding here, safe but passive while the world around you burns. Or step forward, reclaim your power, and find a way to stop this before it escalates into something none of us can control. I'm not ready, I whispered. I can barely control my abilities. How can I possibly? You're more ready than you think. The test in the mirror showed me your potential. The training you've undergone has built your foundation. What you lack isn't skill or strength. It's belief in yourself. Her grip tightened. But time is running out. The coalition grows stronger every day. Eventually, they will find us. When they do, will you be ready to face what comes? Including, perhaps, facing him? The thought of seeing Damien again, of him discovering I was alive, filled me with equal parts longing and terror. How would he react? With joy? With fury? Would he forgive the deception, or would it shatter what remained between us? I don't know if I can face him, I admitted. Then you'll need to find out. Soon. The matriarch began walking back toward the settlement. I'm sending scouts to gather more intelligence about the coalition. In the meantime, intensify your training. Learn everything you can. Because whether you choose to act or not, events are in motion that will force your hand. Better to meet them prepared than cowering. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my quarters, staring at the ceiling woven from living branches, feeling the bond pulse with Damien's restless energy. He wasn't sleeping either. Somewhere out there, he was awake, probably planning, strategizing, consumed by the need to find those responsible for my death. If only he knew the truth. On impulse, I did something I'd avoided since arriving at Thornhaven. I reached out along the bond, not trying to communicate, but simply opening myself to feel him more fully. The connection surged, flooding me with his emotions, rage, grief. But underneath, buried deep, something else. Hope. It was fragile, barely a whisper, but it was there. Some part of him, perhaps subconscious, refused to accept that I was truly gone. That tiny flame of hope was keeping him going, driving him forward, and I was going to have to decide whether to nurture it or extinguish it completely. I closed my eyes, sending a single thought along the bond, knowing he couldn't hear it but needing to say it anyway. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. Wait for me just a little longer. The bond hummed in response, not with acknowledgement, but with that same desperate, fragile hope. Tomorrow, I would train harder, would push myself further, would become what I needed to be, because the matriarch was right. Time was running out, and hiding was no longer an option. The storm was coming, and I intended to be ready when it arrived. The attack came 3 days later, just before dawn. I woke to the sound of warning bells, not the gentle assembly chimes, but harsh, urgent clangs that sent my heart racing. Around me, women were already moving, grabbing weapons, pulling on armor, their faces grim with determination. Nara burst through my door without knocking. They found us. 20 wolves, maybe more, approaching from the south. Full combat gear. Her eyes were hard. This isn't a scouting party. They came prepared for war. I was on my feet instantly, reaching for the leather training armor I'd been given. My hands shook as I fastened the buckles, adrenaline flooding my system. What do? We fight. What else? Nara tossed me a real sword, not the wooden practice blade, but cold steel that gleamed in the dim light. The matriarch wants you in the inner circle. You're too valuable to risk on the front lines. I can help. You can help by staying alive. Now move. We ran through Thornhaven's winding paths, joining streams of women heading to defensive positions. The settlement had transformed in minutes from peaceful refuge to fortified camp. Archers took positions on the high platforms, their arrows already nocked. Others formed shield walls at the main approaches. And everywhere, I felt magic crackling through the air as those gifted with power prepared their defenses. The matriarch stood at the settlement's heart, her silver hair unbound and flowing around her like a cloak. She looked younger somehow, vital with purpose and power. When she saw me, she beckoned me close. "They're here for you," she said without preamble. Our scouts identified their leader. His name is Garrett, second to the Alpha of the Western Coalition. He carries a warrant bearing multiple pack seals. Her eyes met mine. "They know you're here." Someone talked. Betrayal burned in my throat. Who? Does it matter? What matters is that they're offering terms. They want you handed over peacefully. In exchange, they'll leave Thornhaven untouched. Then give me to them. The words came automatically. I won't let anyone die for me. That's not your decision to make. The matriarch's voice was steel. Every woman here chose this refuge knowing the risks. We don't surrender our own. We never have. But... no. She gripped my shoulders, forcing me to meet her gaze. Listen to me, child. If you surrender now, everything you've learned, everything you've become, means nothing. They won't treat you gently. They'll use you, break you, turn your power into a weapon against everyone you love, including your mate. Is that what you want? The thought of my abilities being used to hurt Damien made my blood run cold. No. But I don't want innocent blood spilled either. Then fight. Show them why Lifebringers are feared. Show them that taking you is not worth the cost. She released me, turning to address the assembled defenders. Remember your training. Protect each other. And don't let fear control you. Let it sharpen you instead. A howl split the air. A challenge. Unmistakable and chilling. They're at the southern perimeter, someone shouted. Holding position. Waiting for a response. The matriarch looked at me one last time. Stay here. Guard the heart of Thornhaven. If they break through, you're our last line of defense. Understand? I nodded, my throat too tight for words. She strode toward the battle, her power radiating outward in waves that made the air shimmer. Around me, the remaining defenders took up positions. About 15 women, a mix of young and old, all carrying weapons or crackling with barely contained magic. Nara stayed at my side. You know how to use that sword? Barely. Good enough. Point the sharp end at anything that tries to kill you. She grinned, but her eyes were serious. And if things go really wrong, don't hold back your power. Better to level the forest than let them take you. The sounds of battle erupted from the southern edge. Snarls, shouts, the clash of steel. Through the bond, I felt Damien stir, his consciousness suddenly alert. He sensed my fear, my adrenaline. For a moment, the connection between us blazed so bright it nearly blinded me. Where are you? His thought came through, distant, but clear, the first time I'd heard his voice in my mind since I'd left. I feel you. You're in danger. Where are you? The bond had never been this strong before. Somehow my terror had amplified it, or perhaps his desperate searching had finally found the thread connecting us. Either way, he knew. Not the details, not the location, but the essential truth. I was alive. I was in danger. And he was coming. "No," I whispered, pressing my hand against my chest. "Damien, no. Stay away. Please." But I felt his determination, his rage shifting from grief-fueled vengeance to protective fury. He was gathering warriors, mobilizing forces. The Alpha King was coming to war, and nothing would stop him. "Problem?" Nara asked, noticing my distress. "My mate. He just felt me through the bond. He knows I'm alive." Her eyes widened. "Shit, is he? He's coming." "I don't know how far away he is,
looked at
but
her
he's
desperately.
coming. If he gets here and finds me with Thornhaven under attack, if he thinks you kidnapped me or hurt me, he'll tear us apart," Nara finished grimly. "Great." As if this day couldn't get worse, an explosion rocked the southern perimeter. Magical, not physical, but devastating nonetheless. Screams followed, then more fighting, closer now. The attackers were pushing through. "Defensive positions," shouted one of the older women. "They're breaking the line!" 3 wolves burst into the clearing. Massive, scarred, professional soldiers who moved with deadly efficiency. They spotted me immediately, and I saw recognition flash across the leader's face. "There!" he snarled, pointing. "The blonde one! Take her alive!" They charged, and everything slowed down. Nara moved to intercept, her sword flashing. She caught the first wolf across the shoulder, but the second knocked her aside with brutal force. The third came straight for me, and instinct took over. I didn't reach for my sword. I reached for my power. Light exploded from my palms, silver white and blinding. The attacking wolf froze mid-stride, his eyes going wide with shock. I felt his life force like a tangible thing, pulsing and strong, and I grabbed it, not to extinguish, but to hold, to stop. He collapsed, unconscious but breathing. The other 2 wolves stared at me, and for the first time since arriving at Thornhaven, I saw the fear the matriarch had spoken about. The fear that made Lifebringers hunted, hated, and desperately sought after. "Don't move," I commanded, my voice ringing with power I didn't recognize. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if you force me." More wolves poured into the clearing. Not 3 now, but 7, then 10. They surrounded us, weapons drawn, but none attacked. They were waiting for something, or someone. A figure pushed through the ranks and my breath caught. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the cold eyes of a career soldier. But what made my skin crawl was the collar he wore, thick leather inscribed with runes that glowed faintly, a suppression collar, designed to negate magical abilities. And in his hands he carried another, clearly meant for me. "Impressive display," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "You must be the Lifebringer we've been searching for. I'm Garrett, and I'm here to extend an offer from the Western Coalition." "I'm not interested in your offers," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my hammering heart. "You haven't heard it yet." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The Coalition needs your abilities. There's a sickness spreading through the Western territories. Something magical. Something that's killing pack members regardless of rank or strength. We've lost dozens already. You could stop it. You could save them." The words hit like a punch. "You want me to heal your people, in exchange for your freedom and protection. You'd be valued, respected, given everything you need. All we ask is that you use your gift to help those in need." He gestured around the clearing, at the destruction, the wounded defenders. "Look at what's happening here. Is this really where you want to be? Fighting? Hiding? Treated as a weapon rather than a savior?" For a moment, just a moment, I hesitated. The chance to use my abilities to help rather than harm, to save lives instead of taking them. Wasn't that what I wanted? Then I felt it through the bond. Damien, closer now, his warriors moving fast through the forest. And I remembered the matriarch's words. "They'll use you, break you, turn your power into a weapon against everyone you love." "No," I said firmly. "I won't be your tool. I won't be controlled." Garrett's expression hardened. "That's unfortunate. I was hoping to do this peacefully." He raised his hand, and the wolves around us tensed, preparing to attack. "Take her. Use whatever force necessary, but I want her alive." They moved as one, a coordinated assault that would have overwhelmed me in seconds. But as the first wolf lunged, power erupted from me, not carefully controlled like in training, but wild and desperate. The ground beneath the attackers suddenly sprouted roots, thick and grasping, that wrapped around legs and arms, trees bent toward us, branches reaching like fingers to create a barrier, and from my hands poured light so bright it turned the dawn into noon. "Stay back!" I screamed, and the command carried weight, carried magic that made even Garrett stumble backward. But I could feel it slipping, the control the matriarch had helped me build, fraying under stress and fear. The power wanted to do more than defend. It wanted to destroy, to eliminate every threat, to burn through the life force of every attacker until nothing remained. I was terrifying myself, and then, cutting through the chaos like a blade, came a howl I recognized in my bones. Damien. He burst into the clearing at the head of a force of wolves, his elite guard, 20 of the strongest warriors in his pack. But it was Damien himself who commanded every eye. Even in human form, his alpha presence was overwhelming, a pressure that made the air itself feel heavy. His gaze swept the scene, taking in the attacking wolves, the defensive positions, the destruction. Then his eyes found me, and the world stopped. For 3 heartbeats, we simply stared at each other across the clearing. I saw shock, disbelief, hope, and fury chase across his features in rapid succession. His mouth moved, shaping my name, but no sound emerged. The bond between us exploded with emotion. His joy at finding me alive, warring with rage at my deception. Love tangling with betrayal. Relief crushing under the weight of weeks of grief. "You," he whispered. And the single word carried more weight than any speech. "You're alive. You're—" His voice broke. "How?" Before I could answer, Garrett stepped forward, assessing the new threat. "Alpha King Damien, this doesn't concern you. We have legal warrant to— You have nothing." Damien's voice dropped to a growl that raised every hair on my body. "You're attacking a sanctuary, threatening refugees, and apparently trying to abduct my mate. The mate I've been mourning for weeks." His eyes blazed with golden light. "Give me one reason I shouldn't kill every last one of you. Because we're not your enemy," Garrett said, though his hand moved subtly toward a weapon. "The Lifebringer belongs to— She belongs to no one." Damien moved forward, and his warriors moved with him, a coordinated show of force. "And she certainly doesn't belong to your coalition. Stand down. Leave. Now. Or face the consequences." The clearing fell silent, balanced on a knife's edge, coalition wolves on one side, Thornhaven defenders behind me, Damien's warriors spreading out in tactical positions. All it would take was one wrong move, one spark, and the forest would run red. I looked at Damien, at the man I'd fled to protect, now standing in the heart of danger because of me. And I realized the matriarch had been right about everything. Running had solved nothing. Hiding had only delayed the inevitable. It was time to stop running. I stepped forward, placing myself between the two forces, and let my power blaze visible around me, not as a threat, but as a declaration. "Enough," I said, and my voice carried across the clearing with unnatural clarity. "This ends now. Not with blood. Not with war. It ends because I'm choosing to end it." I looked at Garrett. "Tell your coalition that I won't be their weapon. I won't be controlled or collared or used." Then I looked at Damien, my heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "And you and I need to talk about everything." His eyes held mine, and through the bond I felt his answer. "Yes, we do." The standoff held for 3 more seconds before Garrett made his choice. "Coalition forces, withdraw," he commanded, his voice tight with frustration. "We're outnumbered and outmatched. This isn't over, Lifebringer. When the sickness claims more lives, when children die because you refuse to help, their blood will be on your hands." His words were designed to wound. And they did, but I held my ground, watching as the coalition wolves melted back into the forest, carrying their wounded. Garrett was the last to leave, his cold eyes promising that this was merely a postponement, not an ending. As soon as they were gone, the matriarch appeared, bloodied but unbowed. "Tend to the injured," she ordered the Thornhaven defenders. "Repair the barriers. and someone find out how they located us so precisely. Her gaze swept over me and Damien. You two, my dwelling, now. We have much to discuss. But Damien wasn't listening. He crossed the clearing in long strides, his warriors parting instinctively, and stopped an arm's length away from me. Up close, I could see the toll these weeks had taken. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, new lines bracketed his mouth, and his face was leaner, sharper, carved by grief into something harder than before. Tell me I'm not hallucinating, he said hoarsely. Tell me you're real. I'm real. My voice broke on the words. Damien, I'm so sorry. I never wanted... He closed the distance and pulled me against him, his arms crushing me so tightly I could barely breathe. The bond between us sang with relief so profound it brought tears to my eyes. He buried his face in my hair, his entire body shaking. I mourned you, he whispered against my temple. I stood at your pyre and watched you burn. I blamed myself. I wanted to die because living without you felt impossible. His grip tightened. And all this time, you were alive. You let me suffer. You let me believe. His voice cracked completely. I know, and I'm sorry. But I had to. They would have used you against me, would have hurt you to control me. I pulled back enough to look at his face. My power. It's dangerous. I'm dangerous. If I'd stayed, I could have destroyed everything, so you chose to destroy me instead? The hurt in his eyes cut deeper than any blade. Did you think so little of me, of us? Did you believe I couldn't handle the truth? I believed I couldn't handle losing you. Tears streamed down my face now. When my power manifested, when I killed those wolves without meaning to, I realized what I could become, what I could do to you if I lost control. And I couldn't. I can't. My breath hitched. I'd rather be dead than harm you. Something shifted in his expression. The anger didn't disappear, but understanding tempered it. So you chose to make us both suffer. Very logical. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing away tears. You magnificent, infuriating, self-sacrificing fool. Don't you understand? I would have faced any danger, any threat, if it meant keeping you by my side. Losing you, or believing I had, was worse than any death you could have dealt me. The Alpha King and his wayward Omega can continue this reunion in private. The matriarch interrupted, her tone dry but not unkind. But first we addressed the larger situation. Inside. Now, Damien's warriors had formed a protective perimeter, their eyes scanning the forest for threats. Marcus stepped forward, his expression conflicted as he looked at me. My queen, I'm glad to see you alive, though I have many questions. As do I, Damien said grimly, keeping one arm firmly around my waist as if afraid I might disappear again. Starting with why my mate faked her death and has been hiding in a sanctuary I didn't even know existed. We followed the matriarch into her dwelling, Damien refusing to let me leave his side even for a moment. Nara joined us, along with Marcus and two of Damien's senior warriors. The space felt crowded with so many people, the tension thick enough to taste. The matriarch settled into her chair, with a weariness that made her age suddenly visible. Before accusations fly and tempers flare, let me explain what you've stumbled into, Alpha King. Thornhaven is a sanctuary for women with abilities that make them targets, seers, healers, and yes, life-bringers. We've existed in secret for 3 centuries, offering refuge and training to those who would otherwise be enslaved or killed. And you took my mate without telling me she lived? Damien's voice was dangerous soft. She came to us of her own will, believing herself a danger to those she loved. We gave her what she needed, training, control, understanding. The matriarch met his glare without flinching. Would you rather she'd stayed, untrained, unstable, a weapon waiting to detonate? How many would have died if her power erupted during a council meeting, during a pack gathering? Damien's jaw clenched, but he couldn't argue the point. The coalition's interest in her is not surprising, the matriarch continued. Life-bringers are rare, perhaps 3 born in a century. Their power over life force itself makes them invaluable for healing or devastating as weapons. The sickness Garrett mentioned is real. I've heard reports from other sources. Without her help, the Western Territories will lose hundreds. Then I'll help them, I said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare, not as their prisoner or tool, but on my terms. I'll go, heal who I can, and prove that my power is mine to control. Mine to give freely, not something to be taken by force. Absolutely not, Damien said immediately. You're not going anywhere near the coalition after they just tried to abduct you. She makes a valid point, Marcus interjected carefully. If the Queen demonstrates both power and benevolence, it changes the political landscape. Makes her an ally, rather than a prize to be claimed. It also puts a target on her back that will never disappear, Damien countered. Every pack, every faction will want to possess her. We've seen how they operate. They take what they want through force or manipulation. They can try. I stepped away from Damien's embrace, needing him to see me as I was now, not as the fragile Omega he remembered. I'm not the same person who left Damien. These weeks have changed me. I'm stronger now, more controlled. And I won't live in fear of what I am anymore. He studied me, really looked at me for the first time. And I saw him register the differences, the warrior's stance I'd adopted unconsciously, the way I held his gaze without flinching, the confidence that had replaced uncertainty. Show me, he said quietly. Show me what you've become. I held out my hand, palm up, and called the power. Light gathered there, controlled and precise, forming patterns that shifted like living crystal. Around us, the moss on the walls brightened, the air filled with the scent of growing things, and everyone felt it, the pulse of life energy that I could now direct with intention. I can heal or harm, I said softly. I can strengthen allies or weaken enemies. I can sense life force and manipulate it, though I'm still learning the limits. And yes, it terrifies me. But I'm learning to master it instead of letting it master me. Damien reached out and closed his hand over mine, extinguishing the light. Then we do this together. Not you sacrificing yourself alone. Not me protected from the truth. Together, as we should have done from the start, as equals. The word equals struck something deep in my chest. All this time, I'd believed my role was to be soft when he was hard, gentle when he was fierce. I'd thought being his Omega meant diminishing myself to complement him. But he was offering something different, partnership built on mutual strength, rather than traditional roles. The Coalition won't accept that easily, Nara warned. They see her as a resource to be controlled, then they'll learn otherwise. Damien's tone brooked no argument. We return to Packlands together. We present a united front, the Alpha King and his queen, both powerful in different ways. And we make it clear that any threat to her is a threat to me, and vice versa. What about the sickness? I asked. Garrett wasn't lying about people dying. Children dying. Can I really refuse to help out of fear? The matriarch leaned forward. Help, yes, but on your terms, with protection. And without surrendering your autonomy. I suggest you offer to train others. Teach healers to recognize and treat this magical sickness so the cure doesn't depend solely on you. Knowledge shared is power distributed. It was brilliant in its simplicity. By teaching, rather than just healing, I'd be multiplying my impact while making myself less of a necessary target. I'll need time to learn more, I said. To understand this sickness and develop techniques others can replicate. Can you give me that? 2 weeks, Damien said firmly. You train here, learn what you can, then we return together. I'll use that time to make preparations, ensure our lands are secure, and send diplomatic messages to the Coalition. He looked at the matriarch. Can Thornhaven host us during this period? She considered, then nodded. On the condition that your warriors respect our sovereignty and our ways. This is a women's sanctuary. We have rules. Agreed. Damien turned back to me, his expression softening. 2 weeks to finish your training, then no more running. No more secrets. We face whatever comes together. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. Together. The meeting dissolved. Plans made. Logistics discussed. As people filed out, Damien pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the matriarch's dwelling. I'm still angry, he said, his hands framing my face. I'm furious that you made me believe you were dead, that you carried this burden alone, that you didn't trust me enough to share it. But I'm also grateful beyond words that you're alive, and I understand, even if I hate it, why you did what you did. I'm sorry, I whispered, for the pain I caused, for not believing in us enough to stay. Don't apologize for trying to protect me, even if your method was misguided. He pressed his forehead against mine. Just promise me, no more sacrificing yourself without talking to me first. No more deciding what I can or cannot handle. We're partners, which means we make hard choices together. I promise. He kissed me then, and it was nothing like the gentle kisses we'd shared before. This was desperate, claiming, a physical reassurance that we were both real and present. The bond between us blazed so bright I felt scorched by it, but in the best way, like being burned clean, refined by fire into something stronger. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his hand over my heart. 2 weeks. Then we go home and show everyone what happens when they threaten what's ours. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of intensive training. The matriarch taught me techniques for diagnosing magical ailments, while Nara continued my combat training, now with Damien participating, the two of them working in deadly harmony that made me grateful they were allies rather than enemies. Marcus proved invaluable, using his organizational skills to coordinate between Thornhaven and Damien's pack, smoothing potential conflicts and ensuring supplies flowed smoothly. I watched him with new appreciation, understanding why Damien trusted him so completely. On the 12th day, scouts brought news. The coalition was willing to meet peacefully to discuss potential terms. They'd lost 20 more pack members to the sickness and were desperate enough to negotiate rather than fight. It's a trap, Nara said immediately. Probably, Damien agreed, but it's also an opportunity. We meet them in neutral territory, with enough guards to ensure safety, and we dictate the terms. If they want her help, they'll accept that it comes with conditions. The meeting was arranged for 3 days after our planned departure, enough time to return home, settle in, and prepare properly. On our last night in Thornhaven, the matriarch called me to her dwelling one final time. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before she spoke. You came here broken, believing yourself a danger to everyone you loved. What do you believe now? I considered the question carefully. I believe I'm still dangerous, but I also believe danger isn't the same as evil. Power can protect as easily as it destroys. The difference is in how you wield it, and why. Wisdom earned through struggle, the best kind. She smiled, the expression transforming her ancient face. You'll face more challenges ahead: political intrigue, threats from those who fear your power, the constant pressure of being both queen and life-bringer, but you're ready for it now. You've learned to stand in your own strength, rather than diminishing yourself for others' comfort. I couldn't have done it without this place, without you. Thornhaven will always be here if you need sanctuary again, but something tells me you won't. She pressed a small pendant into my hand, carved wood shaped like a tree, warm and smooth, for remembering where you learned to be strong. The next morning, we departed. Damien's warriors formed a protective escort, while several Thornhaven women, including Nara, chose to accompany us, curious about the outside world and eager to establish formal ties between the sanctuary and the pack. As we walked through the forest toward Packlands, Damien kept pace beside me, his hand occasionally brushing mine. The bond between us hummed with contentment, finally at peace after weeks of discord. What happens when we arrive? I asked. How do we explain where I've been with the truth, or as much of it as they need to know? He glanced at me. You died in that attack, the frightened, uncertain Omega who didn't understand her own power. The woman walking beside me now is someone new. Someone stronger. They'll see that immediately, and if they can't accept it, then they'll learn to. You're my queen, my mate, and a life-bringer. Anyone who threatens you threatens the entire pack. His expression was fierce. Let them try to take you. I'll show them exactly why challenging an Alpha King is a fatal mistake. We crested the final hill, and Packlands spread before us. Home. I'd wondered if it would feel the same, if I could truly return after everything that had changed. But as we descended toward the main compound, pack members emerging to stare in shock and wonder, I realized it didn't matter if home felt the same. I wasn't the same. And that was exactly as it should be. Damien took my hand openly, lacing our fingers together as we walked into the compound. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a basket. A child began crying. "My people," Damien's voice rang out, commanding instant attention. "Your queen has returned." Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but alive and transformed. "We have much to tell you and changes to make, but first..." He pulled me close, his arm around my waist. "We celebrate, because what was lost has been found, and what was broken has been made stronger." The crowd erupted, some with cheers, others with questions, a few with tears of joy or confusion. But it didn't matter. I was home, standing beside the man I loved, no longer hiding from what I was. Whatever came next, the coalition, political intrigue, threats from those who feared my power, we would face it together, and I would never run again. 3 months later, I stood in the Western Territories medical compound, teaching a group of healers the techniques I'd developed for treating the magical sickness. The coalition had accepted our terms. My help in exchange for political recognition, trade agreements, and most importantly, a treaty declaring Lifebringers protected rather than hunted. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would always be those who saw power as something to possess rather than respect, but it was a start. Damien waited outside, his presence a constant reassurance through the bond. When I finished the day's lessons, he was there, offering his hand with a small smile that still made my heart race. "Ready to go home?" he asked. I took his hand, feeling the rightness of it settle into my bones. Always. As we walked toward our escort, I caught my reflection in a window. Blonde hair now woven with thin braids in the Thornhaven style. Warrior's leathers beneath my queen's cloak. Eyes that held both compassion and steel. The frightened woman who'd watched her own funeral was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned that true strength came not from hiding your power, but from choosing how to wield it. Someone who'd discovered that the greatest courage wasn't in standing alone, but in standing beside someone and saying, "Together, we are unbreakable." The bond between Damien and me pulsed with warmth, with love, with the unshakable certainty that whatever storms came, we would weather them side by side. I was no longer running from my destiny. I was finally living it.